Hello, friends from Wildlife World Photographers. I am your moderator, Yetmir Troshani from Albania, currently doing this recording from New York. Welcome to another talk where all we post and discussed here, it's related to wildlife photography. We took a short break, but here we are, fresher than ever, with another fantastic interview. Today, I'm honored to introduce to you Ray Hennessy, based in the United States, for sure, a top favorite wildlife photographer worldwide. This interview, I trust to be a real treat for the ears of photographers of our community. In today's talk, you'll learn about Ray's involvement with respect to not only his unique artistic vision approaches, but also you'll learn more about his online courses, mentorship program, workshops, podcasts, live shows, publication, his acquired awards, and much more through 10 different amazing photographs that Ray has chosen to share with us. By the way, Ray has just updated his website at rayhennessy.com. We'll make sure to share a link. But please take a look and find out lots more. But before we start with sharing the images and discussing everything else, Ray, could you please tell us briefly about yourself, where you come from, and how you got started with wildlife photography?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks so much for having me on, Yetmir. I'm looking forward to this. It's nice to be on the show finally. I know you talked to my girlfriend Emily quite some time ago, which was really cool. So you guys had a great time on that one. Yeah, man. I've been doing wildlife photography since 2006. So I guess at this point it's, I don't know, a bunch of years. I don't really keep track anymore. It's just been a long time. And yeah, I just got started like most people, just a hobby. And I started with my dad, actually, just shooting backyard birds and stuff like that. And then it just kind of progressed and grew and grew and grew. I've been lucky enough to been making a living at photography in some way, shape, or form since I graduated high school. So pushing 25 years at this point. And I started as working at a wedding and portrait studio, then an architect photography studio, then running my own wedding photography business. And then eventually now for the last 3 years, I've been doing wildlife photography. It's been my full-time main source of income. And that's my gig now, man. And I love it.
I love what you do.
Yeah. And along the way, I kind of have realized, both in some of my other photography and especially with wildlife, I really enjoy teaching. I really enjoy passing along the knowledge that I've acquired over the many, many years of doing this and trying to help speed up everybody's kind of progression as far as their learning and stuff like that. And I think especially with all kinds of creative photography endeavors, but really with wildlife, everybody could get there on their own at some point, but the thing I can offer is to kind of expedite it and kind of speed it up. Basically, sharing all the things I've learned over the years that through a bunch of trial and error, mostly error, and kind of hoping to share that and pass that along to people and just help them get better with their photography. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got to where I'm at now. And you pointed out all the stuff, and it was fun listening to you list all the things I do. It makes it sound like I'm doing a lot.
You do. It's amazing. Yeah. So if you, I think we can share some of the photos you send me, and then we'll take it from there. You tell us a little bit about everything you want, and I think that will be very, very very interesting for everybody to hear. So I'll just
thanks. I picked some with hopefully some interesting stories.
Here it is. That's the first one.
Oh yeah, this one is quite interesting. So this was this past year, so spring of 2022. So I didn't mention earlier when I was just kind of introducing myself, but I have for many years been based out of Southern New Jersey. That's where kind of home base was. But in the last year, I have since sold my condo, bought a camper van, and I live out of that full time now, year round. So I'm not really based out of anywhere particular anymore, which is really amazing and fun, and I've been enjoying it. Yeah. So anyway, I was staying up in northern New Jersey for this, and this was springtime up there where I do a lot of warbler photography. I have I'm taking clients out every single morning, and on this particular one, we were looking for Blackburnian warbler, and we're walking down this trail, and all of a sudden we saw an adult white-tailed deer female, and she just bolted. She just ran away. And when they do that, usually there's, at that time of year, there's usually some young around. And I saw one of the babies, and I saw it. It actually ended up walking and tucking behind. If you see that fallen log in the background, it kind of laid down back there. And so I knew the reaction of these animals is to just sit there, not move, and just lay there and pretend to be invisible. That's their defense. And so I thought we could run in real quick, get a shot, and then get out of there, because I didn't want to stay long, because, you know, the adult mother is around there and I don't want to disturb anything too long like that. So that's exactly what we did. We walked in a little bit, and I was keeping my eye on where the other one had laid down, and the photographer that was with me was following me, and we're walking along, and at some point he just goes, "Ray," and I turn around, he points down, and there was another one. There was two of them in there. I hadn't seen the second one, and it was right at our feet. It was just sitting right there. So this wasn't even with my normal camera. We both had longer lenses on. I just reached down with my phone, snapped a shot real quick, and then we got out of there immediately. And then we instantly saw the mom walk back and reunite with them, and then off they went, and that was that. But it was such a cool kind of just, you're walking along, not what you expected moment. There they are. And I used, you know, I'm sure many of you have heard the saying, use the best camera you have with you. Or the best camera you have is the one that's always with you. And in this case, I had two cameras, but the one that I would have preferred to use, my big, you know, high-end DSLR, just had a long lens on it. And I would not have been able to show off the habitat. And that's what I wanted to show. I wanted to show what these deer do. They just kind of tuck in like that and then sit there in this beautiful habitat. And so I just grabbed the shot with my phone, and that's what you see here.
Thank you for describing this photo. Actually, for those of you who do not know Ray, he's very extensive. Also, when he posts images of his, he has always a very nice description. You really merge into the experience. So I think that's something wonderful that you share also with us, Ray.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I do try to, but I got to say, when I'm scheduling all my posts that go on my website and social media, by the time I'm at like caption 50, they start to get a little shorter.
I understand. All right. All right.
Nice. Up in the Alaskan tundra, this is actually an Arctic warbler. So up in the tundra in Alaska is, I believe, the only place in the continental United States that you can get them, or in North America, I think, too, because I don't think they come inland into Canada there. So I think this is a really unique spot up there to see this species. They're an old world warbler, so they actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they migrate over from Russia, and they come over to the Alaskan Peninsula and areas for spring to breed and nest there. And so my friend Jamin Hunter, who is an amazing photographer, he lives up in Anchorage. Him and I were running a workshop this past spring up there for all these types of songbirds. And yeah, the interesting story with this one is we had 5 clients with us, I think. Yeah, 5 clients. Or no, I'm sorry, 4 this time. One was unable to make it. And one of them was feeling not that well on this particular morning. And on this particular morning, our goal was to hike up the side of this mountain, basically, over a bunch of fallen rock fields and stuff like that, to go for a rock ptarmigan that Jamin had found the day prior. So we had photographed it the day prior, and we didn't have any other great targets that morning. So the morning plan was, let's get up there and go for sunrise. We'll let the sun come up and shine in and get these beautiful shots of this rock ptarmigan. And so we did that. But halfway up, this one client who wasn't feeling great, but had decided to give it a shot anyway, she just looked at me. She said, "I can't go anymore because it's pretty steep terrain." And I understand she was feeling not great. So she just said, "I think I'm going to go back to the car." And she was like, "You guys go ahead." And I was like, "I'm not letting you go back to the car on your own, especially if you're not feeling good. It's kind of dangerous walking over the rock." So we split up the group. I went back with her, kind of escorted her back to the car, made sure she made it down safely. And while we were down there, I was just going to wait and see how the other group did and just let them come back down. But in the meantime, when she was down there, she was feeling a little bit better. And so we decided to just shoot right around the car. And we step outside of the car, and there was this Arctic warbler out in these willows. And it was right when the sun was starting to come up. So these are the pastel kind of blue and pink tones that you see in the background. And we weren't able to get close to it, but this is kind of the style that I love, which is showing the bird in its habitat. So I included the entire branch that it was perched on there. I think I had my 400 2.8 with the built-in teleconverter on at the time.
Mhm.
And so I stayed at 400 millimeter just to show the entirety of that kind of bush that it was perched in and a lot of that pretty color in the background. And even though it's really small, it was in a nice opening there framed by the bush. And I think it still stands out nicely.
Absolutely, and this picture really depicts and starts to get into your style with respect to inclusive
Yes.
To the habitat space, and that's something very very amazing, which I think you bring to this photography. With that said, I think we can move on to the next one, and
Sure.
that's yeah.
Back in northern New Jersey again in spring. I was out actually with Emily Reed. We were doing some photography together in between my workshops. And yeah, this prairie warbler is just a beautiful species. This bird was particularly cooperative. I think I had maybe a week and a half straight where I took people to this bird every morning and it just put on a show. It was very tolerant of people being around, so it was never being scared. But one of the things I also started trying to do this year to mix things up for myself was to try and capture these birds in flight. And traditionally, that would be, in my experience, near impossible. The only time it ever happened to me in the past was just dumb luck. If I happened to be pressing the shutter when one took off. But this year, I've been shooting the Nikon Z9, and a few other cameras have introduced this now, and some have had it for a while too, but they had a feature called pre-capture, which is basically, to kind of just describe it quickly, if you press the shutter, it captures the second before you actually press the shutter. So as long as you had the bird in the frame and in focus, you can actually basically shoot in the past. And what it's done for birds like this is allow me to capture these flight shots, these takeoff shots, every single time. So all I have to do is point my camera at the bird, maintain focus, I watch the bird take off, then I press the shutter, and it captures that whole second prior. And with the Z9, one of the settings it has is 120 frames a second. So it does it that fast. And so I basically have a slow motion video of still frames, and I pick out the one I like with a good wing position, and this is one of those. So it's enabled me to capture entirely different photos that I never could have before, and now I can do them consistently, which is really neat. And it's cool to see how technology allows a wildlife photographer to really change up what they shoot and how they shoot it.
You mentioned Z9 and its capabilities. How long did it take you to feel very comfortable as you felt with prior cameras? Because I do remember a couple of videos you shared.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it took me a while. I would say it took me probably 3 months of shooting with the camera to feel kind of comfortable with it. More like 4 to 5 before I really felt like, okay, I understand this camera. I know what it's doing. And now I'm really able to use it up to its full capability. So it took me a while, and that's coming off of, shooting Nikon DSLRs for a very long time. I mean, like I said, it's been pushing 20 years of doing this now, at least over 15. And so I do have a lot of experience with these cameras, but it was such a different style of camera and a different way of shooting and understanding what works, what doesn't, and that sort of thing. But now, like a year in, I love the camera. I sold all my DSLRs. I'm all mirrorless, and I'm not turning back.
That's it. That's it. Oh, here's another magic.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, so back up in Alaska again. This is a red-throated loon. Incredibly friendly bird. It's kind of well known in the area. They've nicknamed this bird Vlad because he's oddly aggressive towards people. And if you walk over to the shoreline, he kind of just comes and swims over to you to check you out. And if you actually lean down close to him, he will try and stab out at you. So you have to be careful around this bird. But he usually just comes in, he kind of hangs out casually and pretty relaxed. So he's great to photograph, and it allows you to get these really different perspectives. So for this one, I was standing up on sort of a dock that was elevated above him, and he had swam in underneath of us. And I was shooting with, I think it was a 70 to 200 millimeter, either that or my 100 to 400. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I kind of realized this is a neat perspective to shoot down on this bird. It was an overcast day, so the background, the water was just reflecting this flat gray. And yeah, it was incredibly difficult because he was so close and constantly turning his head. But I eventually shot enough frames in there. I got one where his eyes and the bill were mostly in focus. It showed that symmetry because he was facing straight at me, which was kind of key for what I wanted there. And the water was pretty clean. The only thing, and I did, as you talked about, I mentioned it in the caption, the only thing was there was a little bit of the shadow from him underneath the water that came in around his bill in one area. So I did clone that out in post just to make the thing look a little bit cleaner. And that was the only change. But other than that, this is exactly what the photo looked like.
Now, Ray, how important it is in your style, the POV overall? Because I understand you make the point of the composition, important of light, the post-processing, but with the POV, how much of it emphasis do you add to your style with respect to it?
Very much, man. Great question. It's hugely important. The one thing I usually try to do is get on my subject's level. And so if it's a bird on the water, that means shooting a low perspective. It's a bird in a tree, that means figuring out how to get at that bird's elevation, whether that be waiting for it to come down lower or finding a hill to climb up, something like that. Whatever I can do to stay on the eye level. But while that's the rule I try to follow, every so often, completely and utterly breaking that and doing something entirely different can yield a wonderful result. So I would say 90% of the photos I photographed of this specific bird were from that water level perspective, but then I realized in this particular circumstance, shooting right over top of it offered something totally different, made the bird look completely different. I mean, if you saw this shot and a profile of it from the side, it almost doesn't look like the same bird. Just the shape is different. The way we're seeing it is totally different. And I think, sometimes getting into those different point of views, those different perspectives can offer just a very unique take on the same subject that we've maybe photographed a bunch. And that's a great thing, but it can be challenging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here's another. Beautiful.
Yep. So back to that, showing off the habitat, kind of making the subject smaller in frame. So to me, this image is almost as equally important about the background and that landscape back there, the clouds with the sun coming through, as it is the puffin. And so this was in Newfoundland. Me and Emily went up there to visit our good friend Brad James, an amazing photographer from up in that area. And so, we had an incredible week-long expedition there and had so much fun photographing all kinds of stuff. But one of the things we kept trying to do with these puffins was to mix it up, just to change that point of view, like you were just talking about, Yetmir. And in this circumstance, when I saw that in the background, I knew immediately, I have to include this in the background. So this was the 100 to 400 millimeter lens, I believe, zoomed out at 100 millimeter. And I just simply stepped back, photographed the bird. I actually closed down my aperture, which is something I do very rarely. Usually I'm shooting kind of wide open at that lowest aperture, trying to get a nice shallow depth of field, blur the background, and, keep my ISO down. But in this case, the background was so pretty, but also so very far away. I wanted to see more of it in focus. So again, I don't remember off the top of my head what the settings were, but I definitely closed down to probably like F9, F10, something like that, and then captured that bird, underexposing the bird a little bit in the original shot, and then lightening him up in post just so I could get a good exposure on that background. But it's just a single image. Nothing's blended together here. It's just a little bit of dodging and burning and that sort of thing, and all taken in one shot.
Yeah, and mentioning that, please watch Ray videos on dodging and burning. It's just another level, another experience. Truly a pleasure to watch. Another thing I wanted to mention here, as we are discussing different points of the importance of this photography, here, for example, the lighting, very dramatic, very interesting, very engaging. How lighting is important in your photography, and how do you treat it also on the post-processing with respect to creating something that really is building your style, which is very unique?
Yeah, thanks. Lighting is everything. Lighting is all of it. If the light's not there, it doesn't matter how beautiful the scene is. It doesn't matter how great the moment is. The lighting can make or break a scene. That's not to say that I don't go out in bad lighting sometimes and try to make something interesting. I've heard some photographers say there is no bad lighting. It's just a matter of figuring out how to take advantage of it. And to an extent, I agree. I think any style of lighting, no matter what the lighting is, you can make something creative, but certain lighting certainly makes it easier, and certain lighting makes it much more challenging. So, I tend to not go out in the middle of the day, in the middle of the bright, harsh sun, because while maybe I can make something cool, sure, it's going to be a lot of work. And I would rather put my time in when the lighting is good, early in the morning, late in the evening, that sort of thing. And it's incredibly important. And as far as the post-processing side of things, I think it's everywhere. It can be all over the place for everybody. There's a wide range of post-processing. Some photographers who are almost strict documentarian photographers with wildlife, and they barely do any edits or don't want to do any edits. And then the other side is the people that are just basically making digital art, that are completely changing a photograph, whether that be swapping out backgrounds, turning a, dodging and burning to the extreme to take something that maybe had a lot of detail, making it all black or all white or something like that. I would say I find myself falling somewhere in the middle. My goal is to present to my audience a beautiful looking photo, but my goal is also for myself is to keep that representative, there's the word, of the scene. I don't want the viewer to look at this and see a beautiful image and then it be completely and utterly different from what I actually saw there when I was there in person. I still want it to kind of represent what it looked like in person, even if I make it just look a little bit better, kind of thing. So that's my goal with my post-processing and my shooting style. And so, yeah, I'm not going to, drop a new background in. I'm not going to, cut the bird out and put it in something different, or do vastly different wild exposures to get things to work, or really change it in post-processing too much. Basically, when we were standing there on that cliffside, that's pretty much what it looked like to my eye, And one other thing I wanted to point out was you were talking about the point of view and the perspective earlier. And, this is another example of where that's so important. I remember stepping to the left and right just to line up those light rays so they were shooting down and pointing like right at the bird, as it was kind of walking along that background there. And so kind of paying attention to all those elements, how they line up, where everything fits is a really important part of how I shoot.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing this. Much of what you're discussing, more in depth, obviously, than usual.
Yeah.
As like folks will talk about this maybe at the level that, depending on the knowledge they have and we have, but having somebody who could just goes a little bit deeper, it's just that much more enjoying. So I thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.
That's your style in full force, and it's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and this is something that is a concept I've really been much more aware of in the last year and a half, and that is, I think once you get, as a photographer in any genre, once you get to a certain level of proficiency, so you understand your camera, you understand your subject, you understand lighting, you understand composition, all these things, and you know how to kind of use them all together. In general, once you get to a certain level, you can go out in whatever kind of photography you're doing and capture a pleasing photo, technically good, pleasing photo that most people would agree that's a nice photo. And so with wildlife, I think the one thing that can be introduced that is completely and utterly out of our control, but that makes such a big difference, is the conditions. And it's these weather conditions, these lighting conditions, these unique conditions. So this is a common loon photographed during my loon workshops up in New Hampshire in the middle of the summer. I go up there every year and spend 2 weeks photographing these birds. So every morning and every single evening for 2 weeks straight, I'm taking a client out in my kayak and we're photographing these birds. We're hanging out, spending a lot of time with them. And the unique thing I get from that is I'm out there every single day for 2 weeks. So that's 14 days, 2 outings per day. So I'm out there 28 times for a couple hours each time. So I've spent, at the end of this, I've spent a lot of time with these birds. And yet, conditions like this happened on 2 outings. That was it. So 28 outings out there, and only 2 of them, it looked like this. So I had this same bird, these birds, this is a particular family that hangs out in the same area all the time. So I spent a lot of time with these same birds in the same area with the same camera lens. I'm the same photographer, but until I had these conditions, I could never make a photo that looked like this, So I could be there on the day prior or the day after, and the conditions can be totally different, and I can't make a photo that looks like this. The conditions have to be there to do that. Now, the photographer has to be able to take advantage of those conditions, and that's where the skill and experience and all those other things come into play. But yeah, the conditions, I just kind of have realized, are such an important part of making a good photograph kind of elevate to an amazing photograph. And yeah, the conditions we had on this morning were unbelievable. The steam just hanging on the water, the clouds, the fog was breaking up, the sun was coming through. It was a nice calm morning. So a lot of things had to fall into place. And in this case, I was using the 1:400 zoomed all the way out at 100 millimeter and just making sure I can include the habitat. And the main reason I could do that is because that bird was silhouetted against that light fog. So it stood out nicely. And, it's still the main subject of this shot, even though it's incredibly small in the whole scheme of this photo.
This photo makes me think of the lighting conditions and how they change depending on your photograph, like where you photograph. I've noticed that, for example, we've been with friends in different places. But something that I started to notice that I didn't know before was that depending on what part of the world you are photographing, the light quality in the morning will just present you with completely different photography.
Yes.
So this, like right here, for example, this lighting quality, this is what's happening that I haven't never seen it before, but I've been in places enough to understand how amazing and that the fact that this could happen. So this is quite amazing.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It's time of year too, right? So these conditions require the water to be warm. So it's in the middle of July. The water is nice and warm all the time from the summer sun, but all of a sudden you get a cool morning. So overnight, a cold front comes in, the morning is cool. It has to be calm too. If it's too windy, all that fog gets blown away. The water gets ripply. It doesn't look good. So all of those things have to happen. And at different times of year, in the same location, you will never see these lighting conditions. It's just only going to happen in summer when the water's warm and the cold air kind of condenses and creates that fog that just lifts right up. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Beautiful. Oh, sorry, we skipped.
Yeah,
sorry about that. It's just another amazing shot of your style depicting your vision of your photography. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, long-billed curlew out on the Californian coast. It was my first time ever out there shooting. Emily and I went out there. Her sister got married, so we were going out there anyway. We extended a few days early and just snuck some photography in. And with the help of a good friend from online who I've never personally met, Emily has met, but Alicia Smith, she's Alicia Birds on Instagram. She was kind enough to give us a couple of suggested locations to visit, and we checked one of them out, and this particular location was amazing. Tons of birds, lots of photo opportunity. We had a blast. And again, the conditions were amazing. The sunset, the mist out over the water, and I saw this bird. This was like anticipating behavior. So I saw a few of these birds leaving one particular area and then flying in and landing right on the beach in the surf to feed. And they had been up higher away, like in the marsh kind of behind the beach. They were just up there resting, and then they all started flying out to feed. And so once I saw it happen, like with two birds, I started paying attention and watching, because I knew very likely that more of them were going to do that. And sure enough, another one came through. I had the camera set to just kind of keep it as a silhouette, because that background was stunning. The layers of the kind of hills and the mountains in the background and that distant shoreline just kind of fading away in the mist was just a really good look. And so, yeah, I just kept it scenic. I didn't crop in any tighter there, and that was the shot.
And I love the harmony that your photography displays, which is the wildlife versus habitat together. It just they come as one, and that just bringing that together, I think that's what I really like and love about your style. Like here, for example, the coloring, the background, how they all come together. It's actually not easy at all to bring it all together.
No, and that's a great point. Yeah. It seems counterintuitive, because when you first start wildlife photography, I think all of us are like, the biggest challenge is getting close to the bird, especially if you're working with birds. It's so hard to get close to them when you first start out. But then after years, you kind of figure it out and you understand more of these birds, especially if they're your local birds and you work with them a lot. And then once you're good at getting close to them, it's kind of like, okay, now I figured that out. What's next? And then that's when I started kind of backing up again. And so now I find myself shooting much shorter focal lengths than I ever used to. I find myself not trying to get close like I used to, and just trying to stay back a little further and seeing how I can incorporate. But like you said, you're including so much more in the scene now. So it all has to work together, and the placement of the subject has to be good. So, honestly, if I like to nitpick my own photo here, I would have loved this bird to be either a little bit higher or a little bit lower. So he wasn't going right through the intersection of the dark kind of, out of focus background there, that shoreline. And I think it would have stood out even more and just given a little bit more interesting composition. But it was a bird flying through the sky really far away. It was more of just like, oh, there it comes, let me grab the shot, even though I kind of anticipated it. I wasn't able to play with composition quite as much as I would have liked to. And so this is the one I got,
Yeah, I just love the quality, lighting, the light quality, coloring all together. It's very pleasing. And
yeah.
And as you often say, you want to present a beautiful image, and
Yes.
every image just hit the spot. In my opinion, just get it done.
I try.
It's great.
Listen, it's not every image I capture. I can tell you that for sure. It's just the ones I share.
Here's another beautiful moment.
Yeah. So this one came about from just knowing the species, knowing the area, and then getting really lucky with conditions. So I had been here the day prior, scouting the area to find this species. This is a Blackburnian warbler in northern New Jersey. And so I had some clients that I knew were interested in that species, and I normally photograph them in different places. This past year, I wanted to find more locations to photograph them in. So I was just going into new habitats that from my experience, I thought I would find them in. And sure enough, I went there the day before, walked along this beautiful little creek. There's like a nice little river off to the left of this scene. And I found this bird. I find them by sound, so I know their song. So I walked through and I heard actually a couple of them in the area, as well as some other species. So I was like, all right, this would be a great place to try. And on this particular morning, I came back the second morning to scout and try and photograph it, because I was there the previous day kind of in the middle of the day when the light was no good. And so I went back to see, are these birds going to be photographable? Can I take my clients there? I went in specifically with my 70 to 200 millimeter lens because I wanted to try and mix things up. I wanted to show off more of the habitat. This forest in there is a beautiful hemlock forest, and it had something unique that I hadn't seen anywhere else in northern New Jersey. So I've spent years up there all over the place. I had never seen a particular patch of forest that was so open underneath the canopy. So it was really dense up top from all the hemlock trees, but underneath just completely wide open, a lot of space. And I thought that was visually interesting and unique to the area. And so, I was really looking forward to photographing these guys there. And sure enough, this particular male was very cooperative on that morning. And when I walked in and saw those same conditions I was just talking about with the loon, basically it was a cool morning. The river was there. The water in the river was warm. And so the fog was just drifting off of that. So if you walked, 5 minutes away from the river, you didn't see any of this fog. It was just hanging right there because that's where the water was coming through. So the location really tied itself together that particular morning. And I shot this and got this lovely depth of the scene. I zoomed out. I was probably around 70 millimeter here, maybe between 70 and 100, something like that. And I just left this bird tiny in the frame. He's a bright orange bird, so he has no problem standing out. And the really cool, interesting thing I found out about this particular scene is after I shot this, I continued to hike down this trail and look for other birds and locations. And I didn't find anything else great, found a few more species. And then I had to walk back. So this was just like going out and then coming back to my car. And yet, I came back through about an hour later, and the sun had come up, the fog had burned off, and the bird was still there, and it looked awful in there. There was bright sun beaming through. There was hot spots, dark spots, shadows everywhere. It just looked gross to shoot in there. It was not pleasing at all. Yet an hour prior, the fog was blocking the sun. It was kind of in there, and it just had this amazing look to it. So, and I never saw it again. I took a bunch of people back to the spot, never once saw that condition again.
And that's just going back to what you mentioned, being the right moment at the right time, and having the scales just brings amazing images like this. And that's wonderful. That's really cool. This is beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. Back to Newfoundland. This is the gannet colony. This is a common murre on the left, and it's a subspecies version of it called a bridled murre, which has the white ring around the eye and the white eye line, whereas the more standard on the left has just the black marking there. So it's kind of cool to see the two different versions there, but they totally interact. As far as I know, they actually breed together and stuff like that. So it's not like they're that much of a separate species, and you can see they basically look alike. But Yeah, trying to show off the habitat, right? That's all I've been thinking about all the
Yeah.
time. And when I got to a place like this, and you can see that coastline in the background, these 300-foot cliffs that just drop down into the ocean. It's just a stunning landscape. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of birds flying around, all covering the rocks in the nest back there, and the conditions. You can see there's this bright light on the horizon, clouds coming over the top, nice and dramatic. It looked really beautiful. And so, yeah, what I did on this one was I shot my 24 millimeter lens. And this is another great win for mirrorless, because this spot was in a spot that if I would have been shooting a DSLR and had to get down there to actually put my eye in the viewfinder, I wouldn't have been able to get the shot, because I couldn't get down to that spot because it was too dangerous. Like, there was too many chances to fall off this cliff and straight up die. So instead, I was able to use the screen on the back of the mirrorless camera, hold it out, see what I was composing, making sure I was getting in focus on the bird. And I basically was like laying on the edge of the cliff, holding my camera out like as far as I could reach, trying to get close to these birds and shoot them at 24 millimeter. And these birds are so funny. So many seabirds are like this, but they just curiously sit there and look at you. As long as you move slow, they're not scared. They just sit there and don't move. And I went down and photographed these guys, and then scrambled back up away from the cliffside, and they never moved. They just sat there. So yeah, it was a interesting experience. And thankfully I was able to actually compose it. So put the birds on the left, get the rocks coming in from the right, make sure the lines are kind of leading down to them, and show off the horizon and the habitat and all that stuff.
Going through all of your photos, you can see the importance of the composition, where the subject is placed is very important. Yes. If you can just share with us a little bit more the thinking process before shooting an image to relation of the composition, it would be great, Ray, if you can tell us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, that kind of part of it is so much of it. And the best advice I give to anybody, and including all the students I work with, is just think about it. That's it. You don't even need to know specifically what you're thinking about at first, but simply think about it. Because I think, especially as beginners or even intermediate photographers that have been doing it for a while, we get so focused on the subject. And so it's like, oh, here's this bird in front of us, or whatever wildlife we're photographing. Here's this in front of me. And you get tunnel vision, and you're just focusing on just your subject. And if I were focusing on just my subject here, I would be using a longer lens, standing further away, trying to get like just the blue water in the background and have it completely out of focus. And that would be a beautiful portrait of the subject. And I did many of those, but it would show off nothing about where they live. You would have no idea where they are, what's in the background, what it looks like on these cliffs. Like, it would give no sense of that even a little bit. So going wider angle, and that doesn't always mean 24 millimeter. Sometimes it can just mean backing up with your telephoto lens. But going wider angle, including more in there, but paying attention to where all that is. So for example, this photo right here, if I had moved to the left a little bit, these birds would be against all those rocks in the background, like on that first layer back. And the rocks are basically black and white back there, and kind of heavily textured. And the birds are black and white. So they would pretty much blend right into that. So that photo would not work at all. It was very important for me to position myself to have these birds against the water, which is distant, a different color, and not textured much at all. And that was part of what's going to make them stand out. Especially because I'm not playing with depth of field as much, and that background's not like completely blurred out like it would be with a long lens. So whether you're shooting wide angle or long lens photography, just simply slowing down and thinking about it, especially if you have a cooperative subject. So if you get that first shot and you're confident you have it sharp and in focus and well exposed, the next thought should be, what else can I do here? How else can I change this photo? What else can I fix? Can I move left an inch? Can I move right a foot? Can I move up or down and fix something out of the way in the background, or change something back there? All of those things are exactly what run through my mind quickly with birds. But once you get that first shot, it's like, just start changing it, moving around, seeing what else you can do.
That's right. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Let's see if we have, yep, absolutely. Beautiful shot.
Thank you. This is in the magical marsh down here in South Carolina in Hilton Head, where Emily lives, which is where I'm at right now. And I just wrapped up my kind of workshop season here, taking people out into this particular marsh, photographing these birds. And so this is a snowy egret, and the marsh is always just, as long as there's no wind, it's like a nice calm morning. again, great conditions. You're noticing a theme here, right? Interesting conditions on a lot of these photos I shared with you. So a nice morning with calm fog and everything like that looked really cool. And this is one of the other things I've been doing a lot more in the last, I'd say 5 years, which is trying out different photography gear that can give me a different look. So this was shot on a 105 millimeter lens. It's a prime lens and it's an f1.4 lens. So it's like Nikon's one of their really high-end portrait lenses. And Emily has this lens. I don't own it, but she kindly let me borrow it and take it out into Marsh on this particular morning. And so what that means is I have to either get really close to the subject to fill the frame, which isn't probably going to happen, or I'm going to be showing a lot of habitat in the scene. But because that lens allows me to shoot at an aperture of f1.4, it allows me to have a shallow depth of field even while showing off a lot of the scene, which is kind of the opposite of what you normally get when you start to get into wider focal lengths. So for example, if I shot this with my 100 to 400 millimeter lens, I'd be shooting it at f1.5 or 4.5. And so that background would be so much more in focus and the subject wouldn't really pop out of the scene. I wouldn't have that shallow depth look, but shoot this at f1.4 and it totally changes. So basically the suggestion is try some different gear, shoot non-standard wildlife lenses and see if it can work. Now, I'm not going to take a 105 millimeter lens out in most areas, but this particular marsh I know well and Emily knows well, and she's taught me how to shoot there. And the subjects are really cooperative. They're friendly. They do allow for a bit closer approach. And so I know that's the spot where I can take a lens like that and get some opportunity. If I'm going into an area I've never been before, that's not the first lens I'm going to throw on and go out and hope I'm going to get some great shots. You know, I'm going to be probably scaring everything away. I'll have like specks in the frame. It's not going to work. But the location here is pretty. The subjects are cooperative, and I know I can play around with lenses because I photographed other birds here at 24 millimeter and gotten really close to them. So I figured I'd have some fun with that lens, and the conditions helped me out yet again.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of these details. You are very big on all of the details, which makes it very, very unique, and that makes it very enjoyable to actually follow.
Thanks.
This is our last image. We'll come back here.
Nice.
Hey, Ray, I want to thank you so much. And I want to ask you a last question today.
Sure.
Thank you for the time, by the way. You are extremely busy, by the way, for everybody to know. We scheduled this few months back.
Yes.
And even before that, I have reached you. So it's very difficult to actually get you for it with some free time. So I thank you so much for making some time for this interview.
Yes,
but essentially, with respect to your styles, when you started and where you are now, can you talk a little bit about the changes that happened, how you have matured, how is different now comparing to how you started?
Yeah, definitely. I think we touched on some of those topics today in these different photos. And it's, when I started, all I cared about was the bird. All I was paying attention to was the bird. How do I get close to it? Because that was a struggle. And so, in the beginning, the first 10 years of me shooting was figuring out how to get close to my subject, starting to learn more about bird behavior in general, and more specifically, individual species behavior. And then beyond that, individual subjects behavior. And so learning all of that is really important. Learning about habitat, feeding behavior, where these birds belong, why they're going there, just basically learning as much as you possibly can about your subject, whatever your subject may be. And that is, I would say, the first big leap of understanding and getting more consistent results. And then on the photography side of thing, it was just shooting as much as possible, going out, making mistakes, learning why things didn't work, just figuring out, oh, this worked, why, just shooting. I think it's great when people, read books, watch videos, learn from tutorials, learn from other photographers, learn from me. But the best thing I think any photographer can do is just go out and shoot. Just put as much time into it as you can, that your schedule allows, if you really want to grow with it, because there is no substitute for that. All the teaching in the world isn't going to make you a better photographer if you're not out practicing and putting those lessons into practice and learning for yourself and figuring it out. And that takes time, so that's the other thing that I was very fortunate to have in my life, even when I was doing other photography, was especially for the last 15 years of my life, I've ran my own business, so I've been able to have my own schedule and go out and shoot whenever I want, for the most part, and put a lot of time in the field. And so I was able to learn from that. And then the other thing that was a big helpful part of my growth was working as a photographer in other genres. So I worked as a wedding photographer, weddings, portraits, families. I worked for an architect photographer where everything was talk about meticulous. Every little thing had to be absolutely perfect. Everything placed a certain way, camera placed a certain way, edited a certain way. And that's actually all I did. I didn't do any photography for that company. I just did simply post-processing. So I did Photoshop on images for, 40 hours a week for, honestly, between my first two jobs, probably about, I think, 12 years straight. I was just sitting in front of the computer doing Photoshop, for 8 hours a day. And so I got really, really good at post-processing. But with the architect photography, I got really good at understanding all the little details. Every little thing counts. Every little piece of that photo counts, and paying attention to all that. So, my style of this, I love backlighting and dramatic light like that. I love including the habitat, and all of that actually kind of ported over and came over from my wedding photography. That's where I learned and honed that style of composition and understanding light, because I had subjects that were only a little bit more cooperative. But, I had people in front of me, so I could direct them and guide them, stand here and, let's try this and try it over and over again until I figured it out and got it to work. And I was able to apply a lot of those techniques to my wildlife photography. So I do encourage photographers, experiment with other genres of photography that give you some interest, because those things can help with wildlife photography. It all kind of combines in one way, shape, or form, right? We're all dealing with light, camera settings, composition, stuff like that, no matter what we're shooting, whether it be a tiny bug, a product shot, a portrait, or some wildlife out in nature. So yeah, just keep playing with that stuff. And then as far as my style progression, I just kept doing what appealed to me. And that is the other great piece of advice that I try to offer to my students is do what speaks to you, do what works for you. Don't worry about social media. I post these images on Instagram that the bird is very tiny in the frame. It doesn't really translate that well, but that's okay. I don't mind, because that's what I enjoy. That's what speaks to me. And then guess what? Doing that for years, now all of a sudden I'm known as the photographer who does the small and frame thing and does it well and stuff like that. So by me sticking to what I enjoyed, what visually appealed to me, what kind of spoke to me as a photographer, allowed me to stand out from the crowd and become known for that and kind of build my name around that, which is a great thing. And I think that's something that all photographers probably want to have, which is to stand out from the hundreds of thousands of photos that we see all the time. There's just so many amazing photographers out there. So how do you stand out? Let's do something that works for you. And in the end, that's going to make you happier as a photographer. It's going to keep you doing this longer. And it's going to make you just enjoy the entire process versus trying to follow what the crowd's doing and maybe not being able to keep up. And then it changes and so on and so forth. And just be, flexible with yourself, let your style change. And it has for me, I'm shooting very different lenses now than I did when I started out. If you would have told me 5 years ago that I'd be picking up my 100 to 400 more than my 400 to 8, I would have laughed and said, never in a million years. But here I am shooting a zoom lens more, and I'm shooting wide lenses, and I'm shooting weird little lenses like this that I bought, which is a Lens Baby lens, and it lets me actually play with the focal plane so I can shift it around. Wow. And it's basically like a tilt lens, but it's all manual focus, completely manual operated. It's a cheap lens to begin with, but I'm using lenses like that to try and get really interesting effects and stuff like that. So just really experimenting, trying different stuff. And that's where my style is going now, is just trying to do something that's different.
Right. It's just been very nice spending this time with you. Thank you so much for finding the time to spend with us. I wish you only success forward and all the best. Thanks much.
Thanks so much.